Welcome to the online edition of the People's Film Festival 2022. This is a hybrid event with both physical screenings and streaming online. And if you haven't already, you can get your pass at kinoshortfilm.com. We have a full access pass, which includes all cinema screenings, or an online only pass for £5, where you can watch all 40 official selections and vote for your favorite film to win. Over the past few days, we've had some amazing chats with filmmakers and a few panel discussions about short film finance, distribution, our festival programmers roundtable as well. Hosted guests from Genera, Amuletto, Director's Notes, Short of the Week, Clipist, Shriekfest, London Short Film Festival, Bolton Film Festival, BFI, Raindance. Tonight will actually be our last industry panel of the 2022 festival, but don't worry, you can rewatch all of the events for the rest of the week. Right now, we're having a discussion on filmmaker mental health. My guests are Rebecca Day, a qualified psychotherapist, a clinical supervisor, and freelance documentary producer. She founded Film in Mind, a therapy service for filmmakers, in 2018 to address mental health in the film industry. Welcome, Rebecca.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And also is Kate Stocker-Wright of Festival Formula, who we're bringing kind of a unique perspective on festival acceptance and rejection. She has a diploma from the Met School in Script to Screen, a BA in Film Art from the University of Kent, script reading and editing course as part of Indie Fund training, as well as working on short films as a production coordinator and script supervisor. Welcome, Kate.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. I guess just to kick us off and to frame this conversation, I really want it to be a very honest conversation. I've been, hosting public chats all week, and what I find is super interesting is afterwards, when we're chatting privately, is when you get some of the most interesting stories, because I think we're so conscious of our public image as filmmakers, which I totally understand, but there's something about the need to portray yourself as successful in order to get ahead in the industry that prevents us from having, talking honestly about our mental health, about how social media is making us competitive and jealous, how we're handling rejection. So I would like to be as honest as possible in this conversation, talking about the struggles that filmmakers have, because I know we can all relate. Let's kick it off just by talking a little bit about your backgrounds. Rebecca, tell me a bit about Film in Mind. I know you're a therapist that specializes in film. I don't know any other therapist that specializes in film. Are there many of you?
No, there are not. I think when I started this in 2018, I didn't actually know anyone else that was doing it. Now there are a few more people who are offering, mental health first aid training in film, and there's the whole wellbeing facilitator, like the wellbeing facilitator role on set that's being trialed with through the BFI from 6 feet from the spotlight, and various other, and So Less Mind as well are another organisation that offer therapy to filmmakers. But really, it's just a handful of people in the UK, and I'm actually desperate to hear about more people who are doing it, because there's a lot of demand for it. Mm-hmm. I've been producing docs for 10-12 years before retraining as a therapist. And it was, the decision to do that there were many reasons, but it came from a lot of experiences that I'd had trying to sort of make it as a documentary producer. And just at that point where I sort of felt that I had made it, I was like, yeah, okay, I think I'm gonna change paths a little bit. And part of that was prompted by going freelance and getting to that point in my life where I was like, I'm gonna start a family at some point, and this is not sustainable. Like, it just wasn't paying the bills, and so I needed something. I wanted something else that could run alongside it. And then when I started my training, I just started seeing all these links between the therapy world and the documentary world, and I just had to do something with it. And I think that's what this whole sort of last few years has been about, trying to make sense of those links and how to offer that to the documentary world in particular, but I think you know, a lot of it translates into other film forms as well. But I work predominantly with doc makers, not just as a sort of personal therapist, but also as a therapist who helps them to kind of interrogate creative process and that sort of more vulnerable side of filmmaking. So, you know, the part that it's like, what inspires you to make a film about your own trauma or somebody else's trauma, or you know, these sort of really big issues that we want to tackle. Kind of what's the driving force behind that, and also how do you keep yourself safe in the process?
So interesting. So like people probably, I mean, I'm sure we all did. I'm sure I do it. Treating your creation, your film, as your own form of therapy, without maybe subconsciously realizing it, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and you know, really needing to set boundaries in that process as well. That's the sort of important thing, is that, you know, that happens a lot in documentary making, but we don't ever talk about it. We don't talk about that side of filmmaking. So people are sort of doing it without a support structure, a framework around them that can actually make it a really healthy process rather than a really draining one, I think.
Can you tell me just a little bit about your work in docs? I know you did a documentary called Becoming Animal, and you mentioned Silent Men, which is about men's mental health, which you says currently in production. Just tell me a little bit about your filmmaker side.
Yeah, I feel like that's sort of falling into the background now, because Film in Mind has just taken off, you know, and there's been, especially since COVID, there's been so much demand for it, and it takes up all of my time, which is great. But yeah, I worked with the Scottish Documentary Institute for a really long time before I retrained. So I was a producer and an impact producer when I was working there, and I worked on a lot of films around about health and death and dying, and you know, the subjects were really varied, but it was in those moments and with those films, especially with the impact, where I was working with the participants in the film and audience engagement on really delicate, kind of fragile subject matter. That was what sparked my interest in wanting to take that further and go down the psychotherapy route. And we're sort of, you know, we're looking at that model as well, and making Silent Men, which is a working title. I don't think it will be called that. It's a personal film as well for the filmmaker. So it's been a long time in the making as he works out what it is that, you know, he's doing with the film. So
yeah, docs are tough. I'm primarily a narrative filmmaker myself, but I have been dabbling in my first documentary, and I started dabbling in 2017. And since that time, I've made several narrative shorts. The documentary process is very different and takes you in a lot of different directions, that's for sure.
Yeah, it does, because it's life, isn't it? And it's complex, and yeah, you never really know what direction it's going to send you in.
Yeah. Kate, let's get to know a little bit about you. I know you're here repping Festival Formula, but you're also a screener for a variety of other festivals. Tell me a bit about yourself.
Okay. Well, basically, I am the strategy officer for Festival Formula. I'm a bit of jack of all trades for Festival Formula. I also do social media. I also am not a qualified therapist like Rebecca, but I do support a lot of the filmmakers that come onto our slate. Dustin, you're actually one of our clients, or for Samaritan, your short film, which is very well on the circuit. But I'm sure you're very aware of the amount of rejections that happen.
Absolutely.
It's I can imagine feels like somebody's taking a bite out of your skin, because you're like, this is my baby, and you've said no to it. And part of my job is to say, it's not your film, it's not your abilities as a filmmaker. Film festivals say no for a variety of reasons, and being a screener has really helped for me to realize that it's so hard for film festivals to program, and sometimes you're just saying no, not necessarily because the film is bad, but you just can't fit it in. And part of the festival experience should be to embrace rejection. It's just something that happens. But a little bit about my background. I've worked on film productions. I've worked on film sets. I know how stressful it can be. I know how certain scenarios can be quite damaging to your mental health. So I understand that few years ago, I've become a big advocate for mental health and making sure that everyone has access to it. But it is quite hard on a film set. It's not an easy place. And like you said earlier, you know, you want to present your best version of yourself, but if you're not your best version of yourself on a particular day, you can almost feel like it's damaging your career. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I mean, I tend to, I mean, I know plenty of people don't feel this way. They find being on set very stressful, but set is my happy place. I tend to always have a very, it's interesting. A lot of people say, "Oh, you seem so relaxed on set." You see, you know, and obviously all of that's contained. So it's good that I'm presenting that, because it can be logistically very stressful. But what tends to stress me more about the industry is how much it takes to get to set, how much it takes after set. It feels like we think of filmmaking as the job of being on set, but the thing that frustrates me so much is that's the minimum of what I do. I mean, most of my time is not doing that thing I love. It is setting up doing that thing I love, or trying to get people to watch me doing that thing I love.
You must have a very organized set then, if it's like a happy place.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no point doing it if it's not happy. I think I love collaboration. I love really being open with everybody, you know, setting the tone for everything. Yeah, you get thrown crazy logistical issues that happen throughout the day, but you know, obviously never taking it out on anybody. You know, there's never really an excuse to start screaming and yelling and, you know, losing your shit. You know, you have to remember people first. You know, you're there. This industry is really an industry that's based around relationships. So if you're not treating people well, I don't see how it's a sustainable pathway.
Absolutely, definitely.
Personally. So yeah, let's see. I love talking about rejection. Let's just start there, if we may, since it's something that you brought up, Kate. Yes, I think it's very helpful to get in that place that embraces rejection. But one of the things that has always not sat very well with me is kind of paying for rejection. It's not that, oh, my film wasn't for you. It's that you are taking my money and providing me zero value for that money. And I started this film festival because I'd attended an event that was all about everything you wanted to know about short film. It was talking to curators. It was talking to even BAFTA nominated filmmakers. It was festival directors, festival strategists. And the thing that I found so frustrating was there was no answers. Literally everybody told you something that was completely contradictory. And this was after a time where I made a film that was my favorite film up into that time period. I'd spent $800 on the festival circuit. And out of those, I got 3 acceptances. And the total cost of those 3 acceptances was about $20. So I spent $20 that I needed to spend, $780 that I didn't need to spend. And that was also very close to my production budget. So I was thinking, like, this is a film that I didn't make just so no one would watch the film that I did make. So in framing my festival, I was like, you know, I don't want to be another festival that does the same thing that I don't like. So we decided it would be a transparent festival, a feedback film festival, to where we love being the first step in people's festival journey, to where you can send, you know, your film to us and you will get a response from us. You will see exactly the reasons why we chose your film or not chose your film. It's all framed around, this is what we think you did really, really well. Keep that up. This is what we think you can work on. And this is why we made our decision. A lot of festival directors are scared to take that on because of the admin work around it, because they're also very stressed with finances and
Yeah.
trying to find the extra time for that. And a lot of them, frankly, are scared to tell filmmakers what they think because they think a lot of filmmakers can't handle it.
Yeah.
And what I think has been so interesting in my journey is the amount of filmmakers that we've treated with respect then come back to us and say, oh my God, thank you for treating me with respect. We have been running this program with filmmakers for 4 years now. And in that time, we've had 3 filmmakers come back that were too sensitive to say, I don't like your feedback, I disagree with it. And every month we get dozens of thank yous to be like, you're the only festival that's treating me this way.
Yeah.
What do you think we can do? This is a big question. What do you think we can do to get better communication between filmmakers and festivals to where festival directors feel that filmmakers understand their struggles and filmmakers feel like festival directors understand their struggles and there's more empathy in the process rather than just cold rejection letters?
That is a big question. I think the best festival directors that I've met, and bearing in mind I've not met them all, but the best festival directors that I've
there's
met,
like 8,000 of them. You haven't met all 8,000.
I know. What am I like? The best festival directors are working filmmakers themselves, and a majority of them are. So they understand how important it is to get that feedback. And as a company like Festival Formula, part of our process is to watch a film before we take it onto our slate and help with the strategy.
Which you do for free, by the way, which is amazing. You can literally send Festival Formula your film. They'll tell you if they think it's festival ready or not. And that is a big benefit to filmmakers.
Yeah. And we're very honest. And we know how expensive filmmaking is. And as you've said earlier, it's very expensive submitting to the circuit. So the last thing we want to do is just be this cash grab company that just, takes everything on and then just throws money at the wall and sees what sticks. It doesn't make any sense to do that. It doesn't benefit anyone. But I think, to answer your question, I think that just trying to have festivals understand what the filmmaker is coming from, but there are quite a few crafty festivals out there that are just cash grabs, and you can just kind of tell that they're not interested in the filmmaker, or they're trying to get like stars in and are only interested in the shallowness that comes with filmmaking. The best festivals out there, when they want to screen your film, it's because they really like your film. And it takes time. You probably know this yourself. It takes time to program. It's a full-time job almost. So when a film festival wants to screen your film, we're always saying to filmmakers, like, embrace it, like, enjoy it. This festival loves your film.
Yeah, absolutely. And as a filmmaker, I've been so frustrated with the festival rejection, and then as a festival director, I've also been frustrated to when you deliver opportunities to filmmakers that they don't take. It's like, oh, I want to screen your film to an audience, and then maybe they don't respond to your emails, or nominate them for awards and you never hear from them. And it's like, well, this is kind of a rare occasion. So it's interesting how it floats both ways. Rebecca, I'm curious to hear more from you on everything we've been chatting about, maybe rejection in your own experiences, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm just thinking more broadly about the way the industry is structured, because I think a lot of what you've been talking about with that sort of sense of rejection and that trickle down, nature of it, it's across festival submissions, it's across funding. I mean, particularly with funding, and I think a lot of people can feel that as well, is there's a real disconnect between the filmmaker and the decision maker. And that, you used the word transparency earlier. I think that's a really big problem within the industry. There's a need, there's a protectiveness almost of or a fear of being transparent, for opening up a can of worms, for then having to deal with a filmmaker who might be vulnerable to that, or just not take it very well. And I think it's really good to hear that filmmakers are responding so positively to your feedback, because what you're saying, what you're doing in that moment is saying, I see you and thank you for all of this work that you've put in. And I think that's what happens when you have these sort of silent rejections from people. It's like, did you even engage with this? You know, because what happens in that moment is you hand over. I mean, with shorts, it's months of time. With features, it's years of time. And you know, so for any of you short filmmakers who are going to go on to make features, you just, that sort of gets, you know, it gets even harder because you hand over all of that work, and then it feels like in a second it's just turned around, and you know there's no explanation behind that, and it is really hard. It's really hard, and sadly at the moment it's the nature of the industry. And I think there needs to be more opportunity for conversations, for open dialogue between decision makers and filmmakers, where there isn't that feeling of us and them about it, because we're all part of the same industry. You know, the whole everyone's aim, isn't it, is to share creativity and to sort of share that with audiences. So I don't know. That's that. I don't know what the exact solutions are, but it definitely feels like more talking is needed.
Yeah, and I think that probably is the solution, right? I mean, you know, the three of us here aren't going to solve all of these problems, you know, by the end of this panel, but just the fact that, you know, we're talking about these things, and Rebecca, I know you're having more speaking engagements talking about mental health at other festivals. Hopefully, that's what's starting to change it. You know, with the feedback program that we started, that's just our solution. We're a bit evangelical about it. We love to like tell other festivals, oh, why don't you try something similar? But even other solutions. One of my favorite experiences at a festival that generally rejected me was an Academy Award qualifier, Flickers, Rhode Island. So a very, very big, prominent festival gave me what they call semi-finalist status. So rather than just a blanket rejection letter, they sent out a notification that said, hey, look, we have 300 films that we can screen. Your film is among 978 that we feel are of a high enough caliber to where we could potentially screen them, but we just don't have the space. But we wanted to let you know. That made me feel so much more seen than rejected. And that's what all festivals do. They have this yes or no mentality, and even confirmation that you're on the right track, that you're getting closer to being accepted to that Academy qualifier. It felt great. It was a rejection. A rejection felt great. So more processes like that, please. Anybody listening?
Yeah. It is tricky though, especially with some of the smaller festivals that just don't have the money and the people power. Sometimes they just have to send those blanket emails. I'm not defending it at all. I agree with you, Dustin, but just want to like defend the little guy and just say like, oh, there's a lot of festivals out there that are just, you know, they don't have a lot of people sometimes, and yeah, it's a money thing. It's sad that it always comes down to money, but it's just the way it is sometimes.
Well, I wonder if even in the selection process, you know, there was some way of communicating, either through social media or through a panel or whatever it might be, through emails, even if they are going out to everyone who's applied, about being really open about what their process is and who the people are that are working on how the selection process works. You know, so you might not be able to respond to people personally, because it's, as we know, that is really hard. For a lot of festivals are underfunded. A lot of them are not working to great profits. It's, you know, and they don't. A lot of them are volunteer run as well. So it is really tricky, you know, to be able to give to everybody what it is that they need. But maybe there is some kind of sort of other approach that can speak to everybody at once. Just say, actually, this is how we do things, and these are the decisions that we've made and why we've made them. And I don't know, just some way of acknowledging.
That's actually.
Yeah. I mean, our approach is a bit more like, I think of it as like a boutique approach, to where we're giving individual, like, everybody is paying us for that piece of advice. If you're being added to the festival, that's kind of the benefit. And yes, that's obviously the attraction to screen your film. But, you know, the paying customer aspect of it is the advice.
Yeah.
But there is a lot more admin that's worked into that, absolutely. But even industry-wide tools are now becoming more available, like Film Freeway, one of the, you know, the main platform for submitting films to festivals, has now enabled a one single click to send feedback directly to the submitting filmmaker from the forms that are collected on their site. So just little things like that are happening in these industry spaces and enabling it to actually be easier for these people. Like I mentioned, Flickrs Rhode Island, they didn't send me individualized feedback. They sent one email to everybody that was a no, one email to everybody that was a yes, and one email to everybody that was an almost. So yeah, you have to, I mean, as a festival director, for your own sanity and your own mental health and prioritizing the needs of your festival, you need to find something that works for you. And I always love talking about other creative solutions, because I have stuff that works for me, it might not work for everybody, right? I guess now let's chat a little bit about income, because that's the hardest thing. Funding, right? Funding to make films, funding to run film festivals, and what lengths we have to go to in order to pursue our art and the impact that that has on our mental health. You know, we look at other careers and there's a lot of, you know, very defined pathways. It's, you know, you're an intern and then you get hired into this position as a junior this, and then, you know, you work your way up. And in the film industry, one thing that's so unique, of everybody you talk to, they almost have a different path in. And I like to think of it as somebody can have a path that you can notice, but typically once that one door opens for them, it also closes behind them. So you can't take that same path. You typically have to take an alternative path and find your own way. Thoughts on that, as far as the lengths we must go to and where to draw the line for your own mental health versus pursuing your passion?
Go, Rebecca, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that even the way you've described that is quite confusing, Dustin, because it is confusing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is the way that you get into this industry? And I think, you know, it all depends on the type of personality that you have and the people that you might know, the connections that you might have, or, you know, being in the right place at the right time. I know that was something for me, was being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And so that's another reason why it's so different for everybody. And, you know, whether you're an extrovert or an introvert, or what role it is that you go into, there is no formula that takes you to where you're going to be. I mean, I certainly couldn't have imagined that I would turn from a producer to a therapist. That was a surprise to even me. So, you know, it's such a, yeah, I think there needs to be clearer kind of training, you know, but with more transparency over what roles people can go into, but what that actually means. But in terms of finance, there's a lot of money in this industry. It's just all sitting up quite high, and it doesn't really trickle down to the talent and the freelancers, and that's an issue. You know, it's
well, and it seems to me that that's kind of what really generates unsafe work environments. That's what, you know, generates kind of what a pandemic of mental health issues is, that access. It's, take me for example, I'm somebody who wants to get a project off of the ground. I know I need this amount to do it. Somebody says, no, you're not going to get that amount. You can get this amount. You know, it's not enough to make that project. And you're presented with, I can make nothing, or I can stretch myself to do this at a cost to your own sanity. And those are really, you know, that's really the reality that you're presented with so many times. Don't know what the solution is there, but just threw that out there.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on something that Rebecca said about being in the right place at the right time. we don't talk about luck that often. We talk
Mhm.
about talent and we talk about money, but we don't talk about luck very often. And I just know I know a lot of very talented people who just aren't very lucky when it comes to this sort of thing. And they're the sort of people that usually end up retracting from business, from the industry, and saying, well, I'm not good enough. And it's not because you're not good enough. Somebody was in a particular room with a particular person. That person was in a particularly good mood and they just happened to get the job. I think that can come across as, you know, if you've spent money on doing a course or doing a degree or doing training, it can be a really hard thing to get your head around. Like, that person like got that dream job that I wanted. Why? Sometimes people are just lucky, and it's not something, again, I don't have the solution, but I think more of us should come forward and talk about the frustrating side of it, but also not turning yourself into a bitter person because of it. And that's a very, very easy thing to do, turning yourself into a bitter person. Focus on yourself. Don't focus on what other people are doing. Just focus on you.
What do you think about, I mean, this is a question that probably everybody has to answer for themselves, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it. At what point do you think is a reasonable place to draw the line when you are presented with these options? Like, I feel like when you listen to podcasts or interviews with extremely famous directors, actors, anybody in the creative industry, they typically tell you, oh, I was down to my last dollar and I really wasn't going to make it. And I was about to go home. Nobody wanted me in anything. And then this happened. And now I'm a superstar. You know, you rarely hear somebody who had a very easy path into it. And I feel hearing that story so often, we tend to accept it as like, oh, things have to get really bad for me in order for me to feel like I've maybe done enough work to actually get somewhere.
We like the underdog stories. That's what we want to hear. I think there's been a lot of people who've just been, you know, they left school, went straight into job, got the best paid job, and are now top of the game. But we don't want to hear that story. We want to hear the story of someone who's like been at rock bottom and suddenly their whole life turned around, because you go, that could be me. But in terms of finances, I think that's quite it's dangerous to think that people should need to be at the brink. And like I've started my CBT therapy recently, but I was on the waiting list for a very long time, and it's sort of frustrating when you're talking to therapists and you sort of feel like, do I need to be like on top of a building for you guys to take my position seriously? Like, I'm just trying to intertwine it into mental health. I don't want anyone out there trying to do with a job that they want to do to feel like that they've got to be at rock bottom in order to succeed at all.
I agree.
Yeah.
Me too. And I think, you know, that drawing the parallels there with therapy, and the answer is no, you shouldn't be at rock bottom before you see a therapist, and you shouldn't be at rock bottom before you decide whether or not to leave the industry or get your big break. I think in an ideal world, my idealist answer would be, you should never accept a job that doesn't pay you, because what that job is saying is it doesn't value you. We work in this industry. You know, we don't give our time. We shouldn't give our time freely in the way that we do because we are passionate about what we do. Just because we're passionate doesn't mean that we shouldn't get paid. And I think the way we describe the industry as throwing us scraps is quite abusive, really, from that sort of structures of power. And I think because we're freelance, a lot of us are freelancers, so we're working in isolation. I need to plug my laptop in. I'll finish this point. We're working in isolation, and that keeps us in that place. You know, it keeps us in that place of feeling like we don't have any power in our decision making. And if we felt that we could all come together as freelancers to always say, no, I'm not going to work in those conditions, and I'm not going to work without pay, that would be very powerful.
Yeah.
How do we do that? is another matter, because that takes a lot of people to get together and say, this is what we're going to do from now on. That would take quite a revolution, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's two things that come to mind with that, and that's obviously, you know, as the point of the crew, of the cast, absolutely, you know, needing to get paid, needing your work to be valued, and this area that you're in when you're portfolio building, right? That's the part that I've always found very, very difficult for, you know, the past 10 years is you're not going to get the gig until you have the portfolio. And you're not going to build your portfolio without asking favors. So you're in this kind of weird ethical limbo, right? To where you're like, I'd love to pay you, please, but will you act in my film because I can't afford to pay you? And can we create something together that is a valuable portfolio piece for both of us, right? And then what I've found so much of the time is then that portfolio piece it's not enough. And you need to do the next portfolio piece, and you're doing that next portfolio piece the exact same way you did the first one. And it's like, when is your portfolio ever going to be good enough to get the money you need to create the projects that you want to create without pulling off miracles?
I think that's the ladder you're talking about, isn't it? Of like the pathways. So, you know, when you're studying, that's your time when you have that creative freedom to just do what you want. Money isn't the sort of driving force behind that. You're collaborating with your peers and you're making your art in exactly the way you want to. And then the next rung on that ladder is maybe that skill sharing that you're talking about. So you get together with your fellow filmmakers and you trade skills in a non-financial way to get the next sort of first professional piece out there. And then that's when you should go into the short film fund route, where the short film funds not only give you money, but they give you that guidance and training. So the Scottish Documentary Institute is a really nice example of that. It's a fund for first-time filmmakers who have finished studying. And they don't just fund you to make your film, they also do training workshops with you. And then they distribute your film to film festivals afterwards for you, so you don't have to do that yourself and pay all those fees. And it's really, unfortunately, it's mostly Scottish filmmakers that they fund because that's where the money comes from. But more of those would be incredible for first-time filmmakers, I think, because that's so that wraparound support and care for them and their creativity, and it gives them space to make mistakes as well and to learn and hone their craft. And that's really important, to not be scared of experimenting.
Kate, I think that's a perfect segue. Can you tell me just a little bit about the support that you give to filmmakers? I mean, I know kind of your policy of like padding rejections and things like that. What else does it involves in your job of protecting that filmmaker that is your client?
I mean, we get so many filmmakers from all walks of life. So we get filmmakers who are very young and starting out, student filmmakers. We get, very, veteran filmmakers that have been doing it for a long time. So, I mean, the best filmmakers are the ones that already know how to deal with rejection, which are usually either ad people or people who have acted. And you've acted, rejection will just be second nature to you. In terms of other things that we do, I mean, we've had so many filmmakers come to us and say, oh, my last film, I spent about $2,000 on festival submissions. And we're just like, whoa, what are you doing? That's way too much. So we've always tried to sort of manage a budget with filmmakers that come to us. We, again, as I said earlier, we appreciate that filmmakers, a lot of it is coming out of their own pocket. So the last thing we want them to do is, spend a fortune when they really don't need to spend a fortune. But another thing that we do, we're very close to festivals. We're not the sort of company that, you know, is putting money under the table so they can select our clients. That's not how we roll. But we do get like nice waiver codes and stuff like that. Again, as Rebecca said earlier, we're all in this together, you know. It's the filmmaker, benefits the festival, and yeah, I can't think of anything else in terms of support. But we're a very supportive company. Like we're keen to show the best version of a filmmaker and get them the best opportunities that they can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I had a great experience with you guys with you know, Samaritan as well. And you know, you get a very detailed spreadsheet that you send out for people, and yeah, it's quite elaborate.
It's got everything on it. It's got waiver codes. It's got when the festival opens. It's got if it's affiliated with the Academy or BAFTA, Movie Maker magazine. Yeah, it's a very, very detailed strategy. So yeah, very informative.
So I think one area to go into now is teaching filmmakers to value themselves over a lot of these prestigious festivals or prestigious funding bodies. I was in a conversation earlier this week, and one of the points was made that I thought was brilliant was, you know, essentially, if you have a bad experience with one of these big names, why do so many filmmakers just keep going back in search of that validation, right? It's, oh, this is the Academy qualifier. I need to premiere here. But this is maybe a festival that has never respected you, or maybe it's not just rejection. Maybe it's something that, you know, you have a experience of attending in person and not having a very nice thing. And I find so many filmmakers continue to support organizations that they have bad experiences at, and sometimes don't gravitate towards smaller companies that actually do respect them because of the, you know, somewhat illusion of the prestige of what their festival might mean, or what this brand might mean, this company behind you might mean.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we do get occasional filmmakers that, you know, we ask them where they've submitted to, and they say, oh, we've submitted to Cannes and Venice and Berlinale. And it's like, those are great festivals, but they're really hard to get into. And, you know, we get a filmmaker that will come along with an artsy, no, not an artsy, but like a family comedy. And they're like, oh, I didn't go to Berlinale. And it's like, yeah, Berlinale aren't looking for that kind of film. And it's not to discredit their film. It's just about putting them into the right direction. And that may not be the big named festivals. That may be the smaller festivals or the mid-tier festivals. And I've attended a lot of those festivals, and they're amazing and they're fun. You get to meet people and you get to network. And to me personally, and maybe humbly, you know, I think that's more valuable than having, you know, a fancy laurel on a poster. That might just be my opinion, but if you meet other filmmakers at a festival and you get to work on another project with them, that's better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, going back to one of the events that I said was kind of the catalyst for me starting my own film festival was a story from a BAFTA nominated filmmaker who said, nobody's knocking on my door. You know, I think we tend to think, if I just hit this industry benchmark, my perspective was, I submit to a festival, I get accepted to a festival, some brilliant producer there sees my film and accepts me on and says, okay, here's the seal of approval. I'm bringing you under my wing and we're going to make this feature. I'm going to do all the producer work for you. And you don't have to learn how to be a self-producing director. Right. And then you see the reality of it is so very different than that. But genuinely, I don't think that's very rare for filmmakers. I think that's genuinely what filmmakers think the experience of attending film festivals, especially the big ones, will be.
Yeah, and sometimes Sorry, go on, Becca. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to agree with you, Kate. I think you're right. I think some of the best experiences I've had at film festivals are, well, no, I don't think. I know that the best experiences I've had at film festivals are meeting other filmmakers.
Mhm.
You know, and that can happen at whatever size of film festival it is that you go to. It's those connections that you make. And there's industry stuff at every single festival. And, you know, decision makers are traveling to most of them, if not all of them. And it's how you use that festival, of course. But yeah, you can feel the warmth and the gratitude for your film that is really rewarding at some of the smaller, you know, many of the smaller festivals, more so probably.
I'm glad
than
you
a lot of bigger ones where it can get lost amongst everything else that's going on.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm glad you said the word warmth, because I was just thinking, like, I won't name the festival, but it was a big named festival, and my colleague Katie went to it, and she said it was quite a cold experience, and that was the word she described it, cold. It was amazing because it was a big festival and the client got to screen there, but warmth and welcome, and going back to what you were saying earlier, Dustin, about you know, feeling seen. Sometimes it is the mid-tier and sometimes even the smaller festivals that are putting all their love and time and energy into it that will give you that warmth and that welcome.
Yeah, and you could meet that person at that smaller festival that's then your defining relationship of your career.
Exactly.
You never know.
You never know. You won't know until you go.
Yeah.
We won't take too much more of your guys' time, but I think probably a good thing to wrap it up with is maybe any tips or mindfulness practices that you found are maybe helpful for yourself as a filmmaker or helpful in working with other filmmakers. We'd love to do everything we can to make the industry as nice and cozy a place as possible, but the reality is that's not the world we currently live in. We can strive to make it better. What can we do ourselves to protect our own mental health despite situations that might try to dent it?
In terms of like little nuggets of advice, just as a little example, I attended the BFI Future Film Festival about a couple of months ago with my colleagues, and we had a stall, and we kept having these quite young filmmakers coming up to us and saying like, "Oh, I'm trying to be a filmmaker," and I said, "Oh, have you made a film?" And they said, "Oh, yeah." And I was like, "Well, you're a filmmaker then."
You are a filmmaker.
You are a filmmaker. If you've made a film, you're a filmmaker. Don't. Ego can be a good thing. If you're using your ego to be manipulative and mean to people, that's wrong. Use your ego to say that you belong into a room, and use it to be connecting and nice to people.
I think we might have lost her for that critical tip. We'll see if maybe she tries to rejoin here. But I think you're absolutely right with that.
Yeah.
It's what I would say is confidence versus what egomaniacalism.
And it's a fine line.
Yeah, it's okay to own something, to like your own work. I mean, I don't know why you would continue to make films if you didn't think you were somewhat good at it.
Yeah.
I mean, walking into the room and saying, I'm the best thing that's ever happened to filmmaking is egomaniacal. But to say, but to even say that, I am a filmmaker. You didn't even say I'm a good filmmaker. You're just stating a fact. You've made a film, you're a filmmaker. That shouldn't be an ego thing. That's just a confidence thing.
Yeah. If you're a fireman, you wouldn't be like, "Oh no, I'm not a fireman." You'd be like, "Well, you're a fireman. It's your job. It's what you love doing. So say it. Say you're a filmmaker."
So we lost you for a little bit there, Rebecca, but you're back. Did you get the question?
I think I got some of it, but I liked what I'm hearing as I come back in, and I agree with that. own your status as a filmmaker.
Yeah. So it's what. Sorry, I was going to say just what tips or mindful practices can we as filmmakers have for ourselves, since the industry can be a bit harsh at times?
Oh, I have many. I have so many. Learn to say no. That's a good tip. With the long working hours, the low pay, I think learning to say no is really useful. Carving time out for yourself to reflect on your work, to do something that isn't work, to move your body, to exercise. They're really important things to remember who you are when you're not making films. And just to remind yourself also why you got into the industry in the first place. What I've been struck by a lot when I'm talking to people on mental health panels and workshops and in session as well, is I can hear some of the I hear a lot of the horror stories of the hardship that people are facing when they're making films. But if I ask them, would you leave the industry? What would it mean to you to stop making films? They're like, no, I wouldn't. And so maybe we should talk more about why that is. What is it that we love about making these films, and celebrating that, as well as talking about the hard parts of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking for myself, I know one thing that I've come to terms with is just how much this is my identity. There is a natural storyteller within me that even my parents recognized from a very young age and got me involved in community theater and acting, and it's all kind of spawned from there. So I know I'm the type of person that will be doing this in some form or another throughout my life. The self-expression of it, I love the so many different factors of it. There's obviously the connective factor of it, to connect to other people and connect to audiences. There's the self-exploratory aspect of it, challenging yourself to grow aspect of it. Yeah, everybody's got to answer it for themselves, but it's definitely important to always go back to why you're deciding to wake up and do this every day.
Yeah. I think it's important to listen to other people. Like, even listening to you saying that, Dustin, is inspiring. And I think, we live in a world now where it's so easy to just talk at things, like even using social media. It's so easy to just talk at people. I think it's important.
Instead of with people.
Yeah, talk with people, not at people.
Yeah, so support each other. I think, following on from that, Kate, I was going to say don't be afraid to ask for help, but actually maybe a better way to say it is support each other.
Yeah.
Because I think once we start talking, what we find is that everybody else feels the same. So we're also afraid to say I'm struggling. But what you find is that when you do, someone else will turn around and say, oh, I feel the same. And there's a huge sense of relief in sharing that.
Mm-hmm. I have a long overdue social media post that I want to do, which is, because we're always on social media, right? Look at the festival that I just made it into. Look at the award that I just won. I want to do a dedicated post that is, look at all these festivals that rejected me. and more people will probably like it than the one I posted of the award.
Embrace the rejection.
Well, thank you so much for chatting with us, guys. Any final thoughts before we dip out of here?
No, it's been lovely being part of this panel. Mental health advocacy is very important to me, and I'm glad that it's becoming a bigger topic. So I'm very chuffed that you've asked me to be on it. Thank you.
Absolutely, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk to you both, and I love what you're doing, Dustin, with the festival. It sounds like a brilliant approach, and I think, everyone can find different ways of being transparent, but I think that should be the word of the day. Transparency is so important.
Definitely.
Just finding a way to do it.
I found out Rebecca and Film in Mind. I didn't know who you were, so it's lovely to finally know what you're doing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, love the work you guys are doing. Love to get you a platform to raise awareness so more filmmakers know about how you can support them. It's wonderful.
yes, there is a little bit of support out there, and hopefully the more we ask for it, the more there will be. So, you know, yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, guys. We're going to sign off now. And I just really appreciate you guys joining. Catch you next time.
Take care. Have a nice day.